someone else's head and someone else's heart and someone else's history, and to understand what's driving their choices. But that's what we're trying to do, both for Palestinians and for Jews.
You know, there is no other single issue that's been paid attention to like the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whatever happened there, you know, the headlines of the media. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is a lot of horrible things happening all over the world. Yeah. I mean, even in Mexico and South America, our neighbors in the north and our neighbor in the south. But why the Palestinian-Israel is taking that much attention in our American psyche? I mean, it seems like we pay too much attention to the conflict. I understand the depth, the historical and the biblical and all, but there is other major issue going on in the world, but we pay a lot of attention to that conflict.
Well, I think there are several things involved. One of them is a kind of guilty conscience from years of prejudice and oppression of Jewish people, pogroms, and of course the Holocaust. And the U.S. aware that leading up to the Holocaust and into the Holocaust, we maintained our immigration quotas and didn't allow the Jews to enter from Germany, even when Germany was willing to send them. We didn't know, of course, at the time, and originally we didn't know what the next step was going to be. I don't think Germany did either until things developed in a certain way. But as we look back, we're feeling very, very guilty about that, and we want to do something to help make it up. Unfortunately, what we're trying to do to make it up is burdening other people. And that's understandable because of the history. If you ask Jewish people, where would you really like to settle and live? Well, they'd like to settle and live in their historic homeland, where all of their scriptures are talking about what life is like there. All their laws are built around life there. And that's the sort of dream, is to restore their government in the ancient homeland, and to restore there a Jewish and a democratic government, so that they can, as it were, relax now, and they're not worried anymore that some Christian missioner is going to come in and steal their kids and make them Christian and pull them away from their traditions, and they can live their normal life, as you say, you go to probably McDonald's then, and so on. But there's a problem, because, of course, there are other people in that land, and if they were simply to draw a line around their historic homeland and say, well, here's our country, there would be a majority of non-Jews in it, and so the only way it could be a Jewish state would be not to be democratic. Or the only way it could be democratic would be not to be Jewish. So what can they do to have these three things? This land, Jewish and democratic, that's a dilemma, unless somehow or other the demographics changes so that now you have a majority of Jews there. So much of what they seem to be doing now seems under the surface to be an attempt to encourage non-Jews to go somewhere else. Now, there are a variety of ways you can do that. The way that currently you do that is to make life unpleasant enough that they'll move. Another way to do it would be to offer them serious inducements to go. Let's say the United States said, we will offer you citizenship and a modest house and a year's salary and job training and English language lessons to come to the United States. Now, if that were offered, would some...
To the Palestinian, you mean?
To anybody who's not a Jew in Palestine. Palestinian, anybody. You know? Would some of them take it up? Well, probably, because some have come anyway, already, even without those inducements. Well, that could change demographics. That would be a rewarding and a pull way of changing the demographics, as opposed to destroying houses, putting enclosures, making life miserable, which is a negative and push way of changing demographics. Now, of course, it's not fair to say to people you have to leave your own country. On the other hand, as we look at Muslims and Christians, and if Muslims and Christians and Jews really loved each other and really cared about each other, what would be the generous thing for a group to do? So maybe we need to think outside the box.
I mean, I'm talking that offer could also, that very same offer can be offered to the Israelis. I mean, there are more Jewish people living in New York than Israel.
Yes, it's true.
So, and more people leaving Israel than coming in. So the claim, the historical, biblical claim it seems like it's not a big priority for a lot of Jewish around the world.
It's a priority for a certain community of Jews who think that that religious sense and that sense of place is really important to them. And to some extent they drive the governmental decisions, partly because Israel does have a democratic government, even though it treats its Arab citizens differently than it treats its Jewish citizens. But it is an elected democratic form of government, and one in which minority groups have a considerable amount of influence because they're part of the legislature, as opposed to the United States, where if you're not close to 50%, you probably won't elect a representative. So this group has considerable effect on the government because they have to draw it into their coalition. But many other people would just as soon live in Brooklyn, and of course many of them do. So that's true. And I don't know how the Jewish community would react if this offer were made to them.
You mean, if we're going to look at this conflict and would like, and try to understand it and try to do something about, should we look at it from a religious perspective, or should we look at it from a human, historical, socioeconomic, political, and try to solve it from that way? From a religious perspective, now you are getting you're not just dealing with the Palestinians, you're dealing with 1.5 billion Muslims.
Yeah, plus Christians.
Plus Christian too.
Yes, especially in the United States.
Exactly.
And I'd say that we have to deal with it according to the issues that are most important to everybody, to the various individual people. So if you have somebody who doesn't think much about religion, doesn't care much about it, but does care about the social economic, then that's how you deal with it. Actually, even religious people care about social economic issues. But if the person has a strong religious sense, then we need to take that into account also. And so, for example, there are many Christians in the United States who are what we might call Christian Zionists, who honestly believe that we're about at the end of the time, and that the prophecies need to be fulfilled, and the prophecies as they read them talk about a Jewish community in the land with a temple and with worship. And so they say, in order for everything to come to a conclusion and for Jesus to return, we need to have the Jews in control of the land and the temple rebuilt. Now that affects a lot of political issues, you see, because then they say we need to support the state of Israel, and if we say, well, look how injustice is to Palestinians, that seems to be of secondary concern to them. Although I would say to one of them, if you're really serious about what you're saying, then maybe you should be offering the Palestinians this deal that I just mentioned,
the Americans.
and putting real money into it, and embracing them as brothers and sisters in the faith, and saying, come, let's come here and we'll see what happens. Now, unfortunately, that group also thinks that once the Messiah comes, he's going to convert a lot of Jews to Christianity, and the ones that he doesn't convert are going to be wiped out in a war. So the Jewish community is not quite sure what to make of this support.
What kind of, the nature of this alliance is really, it's interesting.
Short term, it seems good to them because it pressures the United States to support the current government of the State of Israel. But long term, of course, they don't believe it.
Well, isn't it that dangerous? We try to kind of bring a biblical interpretation of our foreign policy. I mean, a lot of people saying, what the Bush administration is doing is really fulfilling this very same prophecy of this Christian Zionist biblical interpretation of events. So, in your feeling of what's going on, is this in the background of those people in the White House, or is just was it convenient to get there? Saddam was weak. Let's just reaction to 9/11. I still don't understand. About this. How much of what's going on now in the Middle East, our foreign policy, is really tied to this biblical view of the conflict?
This is difficult to answer because we're trying to look into someone's brain and hard head and see what they think. As far as the political pressures are concerned, it has a significant influence. And you say, isn't it dangerous to bring in